Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot in the news. It's funny. We reflect. Sometimes during the Trump administration, we can reflect on the fact that at times we were kind of searching for topics. But we have to thank our esteemed president because there's no shortage, is there?
No,
he just keeps on giving and giving and giving. Do you think he's doing it just to help Carnivore Radio? That's a discussion for next week.
There you go. You know, it's funny. When I was a reporter full time, I had a column in one of the weekly newspapers. And anytime I was short on a topic, I was able to turn to Richard Blumenthal, because invariably he would say something so stupid that there was my column for the week. Biden is doing the same thing for us now.
Just keeps on giving and giving. That's why our ratings are way up. So the insurrection, as they call it, you have some word on that, don't you?
Yes, the FBI report came out. And of course, they were trying to sweep this under the rug as everybody was focusing on Afghanistan. But according to the FBI investigation, there was no organization behind what happened on January 6th. They completely exonerated Donald Trump from having anything to do with it. This was just a riot, not something organized, not something that Trump put into play. And of course, you know, the conspiracy theorists on the left don't want anybody to hear this. But the fact of the matter is, this was just a bunch of Americans that got very angry at what the left was pulling.
A bunch of nuts to do what they did. I don't think Trump orchestrated it. I think it was extremely poor judgment. And I think it ruined, or certainly will have and does have a negative impact on his viability in 2024. Your thoughts?
I don't know that it does, because according to a Rasmussen poll that just came out, if Biden and Trump went head to head right now, Trump would win in a landslide.
I agree with that 100%. I think the only question of that is, I think if Biden ran against, Colonel Clown, Bozo the Clown, I guess, he would lose to that too. So the bar is pretty low. I think I would have a 30% chance of beating President Biden in an election, and that's giving myself no cred whatsoever.
Right.
It gets more and more apparent that there's no one home.
No, there's clearly no one home. And unfortunately, our vice president doesn't seem to have anything up there either.
No, and there was a little report that she was a victim of the Cuba ray, or whatever they want to call it, that affects your brain. Well, the first thing is you have to have a brain to be affected. So I think that theory is null and void right from the start. But I wonder if they're not. Yeah, go ahead. In other words, in order to have lung cancer, you need to have lungs.
Right. Yeah, she's on her foreign trip now, and as she goes through Southeast Asia, every time she makes a press stop, she makes a bigger fool of herself. Foreign leaders are mocking her. America, thanks to these two idiots, has no credibility whatsoever.
You know what's funny, Dr. Lopkin, and sad? You can wax back to the days of Obama, not one of the greatest presidents on the international circuit, to any stretch of the imagination. He looks like Winston Churchill. Am I not correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Joe Biden is rising up the charts for worst president. I mean, right now, I'm thinking he ranks pretty much at the worst president since Johnson, and he may keep going up.
I like that you said Johnson, because he gets a free pass from the liberal intelligentsia. I believe that Johnson, there's a whole other show, but set the stage for America's decline before that buffoon got in office and got us into a war with no strategy for victory, which the left obviously just, glosses over. Oh, no big deal. He had the Great Society. Well, yeah, he had the Great Society, but who's the majority of people that fought in Vietnam? Many of them were minorities. So, hello. Right. But well, he was the one that set the whole stage.
Right. What amazes me about that is how many liberals I hear who will blame Vietnam on Nixon. And it's like, he said, Nixon got us into that war. No, Nixon took office when we were already over there.
And by the way, if Nixon did not get impeached, we might have had an honorable settlement. And there's a lot of similarities because the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese, had no respect for Johnson. He was not intelligent. I'm sorry to break it to our liberal constituency or listeners out there. He was not an intelligent man. He had a strategy for victory that you'd have to be on acid to think that was good. We're going to kill more of them than they're going to kill of us. Yeah, that's going to work. Okay. So the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese had no respect for Johnson. They did Nixon. And if Nixon was not impeached and, he did it to himself, like he said, he gave the liberals a knife to kill him, and they did. We might have had an honorable settlement in Vietnam. What do you say?
It's very possible. And the parallels are eerie to what's going on now because the Taliban did not want to take on Donald Trump. They were actually concerned about him, but they were chomping at the bit to take on Biden. In fact, there was a letter that was found when they killed Osama bin Laden detailing their plans that they wanted to take out Barack Obama because they knew Biden was a joke. So they were actually
funny. That's really
planning
funny.
It back then.
No, that's interesting and funny that you said that because a friend of mine sent me a text message that bin Laden thought that Biden was the best thing, that he was the gift that could keep on giving. Back then, I'm talking 10 years ago.
Yes, when he was vice president.
Yes.
Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, they all thought a Biden presidency would have been the best thing that happened to them. Guess what? They were right.
Well, one thing I want to go before we get into the Trump border decision, court decision. It is very sad to me, and I'm being as upfront and honest as possible, Dr. Lopkin, and to our listeners, that I think, yes, there were some, people out there that, made the wrong, or at least the calculation was a little askew that, Donald Trump, we've always talked about this, Dr. Lopkin, was not your best friend. You and I would not get along with him. He was a buffoon. He was an ass. The list could go on for but Americans have to get over the fact that he's not your friend. He's not your boyfriend. The whole thing about, president should be a guy that you can have a beer with. No, he's not, or she's not. They have to be effective. Comment, Dr. Lopkin.
Yes, they do have to be effective. They're not there to be your friend. However, I'm going to push back a little bit in your characterization of Trump, because one of my business partners actually used to work with him, and he knows Donald Trump personally. And he is the first person to tell you, the person you see on TV, the person that's in the press is not Donald Trump. It's a character he plays to put people off their guard. Now, in the case of politics, it did not work for him. It's worked very well for him in business. But the fact of the matter is, he does not like the people in power and does not hesitate to show it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, he would rather deal with the workers than he would the folks in power. And that, of course, turned all of Washington against him.
And that, if he kept his shit together, I'm sorry, because I do have some animosity towards him. I guess disagree with you about his January 6th behavior. I think that was a lack of judgment, to say the best, put in the best frame of thought, and his actions during his presidency, going down to the lowest common denominator, texting or tweeting about the waiter at Denny's. It was not presidential. But I believe that when he got into Washington, he was astounded by the level of incompetency coming from the private sector, which we have a friend, Chris Calandra, who said that, in any day he meets 100 people more competent than someone like Richard Blumenthal. Okay. So he must have kind of, pushed back. You have generals, everyone thought, oh, Trump's pushing back. How does he not respect these generals? You have generals like Miley Cyrus. How can you, these people, that's not George Patton.
Well,
Dr. Lopkin?
You know what, though? That's a very good point. Everybody was going off about how could Trump argue with his generals? How could he not take
They've
their
always
advice?
been wrong.
And yet they've been completely silent on the fact that Joe Biden ignored every one of the generals. He ignored what our allies were saying. And got us into this miserable Afghanistan situation with the pullout.
Impeachable, by the way.
Because he did not listen to his advisors. And what absolutely boggles my mind is that there was one comment by a reporter on Fox saying she couldn't fact check the president fast enough because the lies coming out in his statement were so blatant and so obvious. I mean, he's claiming that there's been no pushback from our allies. Meanwhile, our allies are talking to the newspapers, and ripping him a new one. Nobody ever told him that this was a bad idea. All of his advisors have come out and said, no, we told him this was a bad idea.
No, it is no question about it. And one thing I want you to comment on, everyone getting back to Trump, and we talked about Nixon in the 70s. The big claim was that, they're insensitive. And so I believe, and I'll go out on a limb, I think Trump had more humanity than the coldness I see from President Biden. I mean, cut the Keystone Pipeline. Well, let him get jobs. Yeah, Mr. Biden, you've been on the dole for 40 years. Go out and get an $80,000 job. Tell me how easy that is. And his coldness about affirmed debt. I mean, there's no question that people are going to be left behind, Dr. Lopkin, and many of them women. How do you just go to bed at night and call around, for the reconciliation budget? He should be on his phone calling every world leader, getting things done, but he's worried about Nancy Pelosi's reconciliation initiatives. What the hell is going on? Talk about insensitivity towards women, too.
Joe Biden does not care about anybody. When he cut off the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, he said, oh, well, there'll be other jobs for these people to get.
Yeah,
those
sure
jobs are not there. The jobs he was referring to aren't going to come for years. What are these folks supposed to do in the meantime? He does not care about the women in Afghanistan, and he never has. We talked about this on the podcast last week, where back in 2008, he wanted to pull out, and when somebody asked him, well, what about the women in Afghanistan? He said, F them, they're not our problem.
If that was Donald
no
Trump,
compassion whatsoever.
If that was Donald Trump or Mitt Romney, he would be ripped into a new one, as you say.
Yes.
And forget about the politics. As a human being, how do you make the pivot that you have Americans, you have Afghani women that are going to have potentially a horrible outcome, and you're worried about an infrastructure bill? What does that say about his moral compass, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, that's just it. He's not concerned even about an infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill has the votes to pass already. It was passed in the Senate bipartisan. The House is holding that up because they want to tie it to this $3.5 trillion boondoggle.
Of course, yes.
So he's not even about helping He's certainly not about helping Americans. Let's not forget, after he cut the Keystone Pipeline, he cut the objections to allow the Russians to build theirs. So he's not concerned about American jobs. He's not concerned about climate change. He handed more power to the Russians. Now he's pushing this Green New Deal in the $3.5 trillion bill, which is going to hand the energy infrastructure to the Chinese, because 80% of solar panels are built by the Chinese. We need rare earth materials to build batteries for electric cars, to build the solar panels. China has an abundance of these, and guess where another abundance is? Afghanistan. And he just handed this to the Chinese and the Russians. Everything he has done has made our enemies stronger.
Yes, there's no question about it. And it's not only him, though. It's been going on for a while. We made China who they are today. In fact, I was reading an article that we are incapable of building any kind of military or civilian airplane without Chinese input or production. That's if that was World War II, that's exactly like saying we could not build the P-51 Mustang without Hitler's Germany. That is a sad state of affairs. That is a suicide of a superpower.
Well, the fact of the matter, there's been a lot of conversation over the last week over whether or not America qualifies as a superpower anymore.
I'll go on record. No. And when you talk about, Biden and Pelosi, these are the people, and Schumer, who was dancing with Stephen Colbert while there's people dying in Afghanistan. Stephen Colbert is a political hack. Okay, he's about as funny as a venereal disease. And Schumer, Chucky's doing boogalooing with him. I mean, talk about being out of touch. But these are the geniuses that are going to lead America. And you look at China, it's already a foregone conclusion. Dr. Lopkin?
It really is. And, it's funny, though, because there is a huge disconnect between what the liberals believe and what the liberals present and what's actually going on in the United States. You meant, talking about Colbert. The liberals love Colbert.
Oh, God.
If you check the ratings, do you know who has the highest rated late night show right now?
Yeah, what's his name from Fox?
Yeah, it's Greg Gutfeld on Fox News.
Who's actually funny, by the way, and witty and intelligent, unlike Steve Colbert, who, something? Bad move, Mr. Colbert, and I wish him nothing but the worst of success, is he hitched his horse the easiest, taking the easy way out, Trump every night to his minions, and Trump's gone, and what he's got left? Nada, nothing. Am I not correct?
He has
nothing.
And the fact of the matter is, prior to Trump taking office, Colbert was in danger of losing the Late Show. They were going to pull him off the air and find a new host. He was doing so bad. Trump saved his career, and now you're watching it go down the toilet because he was a one-joke pony.
No question about it. Now, you said there's a ruling on the Trump border strategy or initiative.
Yes. As you recall, during the Trump years, they had a policy that if you were waiting to get into the country, you could not be released into the country. You had to wait in Mexico. And that kept people in Mexico. And we did not have this huge border crisis. Well, Biden pulled that policy. Border states took the Biden administration to court, and the Supreme Court ruled on late on Tuesday that Biden did not have the ability to revoke this policy. So now, effective this weekend, the migrants have to stay in Mexico. They cannot be given a court date and then let go into the country. Now, that should have a big impact on the number of people coming in, but more importantly, it should also help flatten the curve on COVID, because so far they've found 7,800 migrants with COVID that have been released into the country. No vaccine, no masks, no way to track them, just go. So this ruling hopefully will, help stop what's going on at the border. I don't think it's going to solve the problem all by itself, but also it could have a major impact in our COVID rates.
I would agree, and I also think that it's a blessing for Biden. It gets him off the hook without him having to do something that would upset the AOC branch of his party, which is an increasing part of his party. And so I also want to conclude, we have two things left, is Biden, I don't know if you saw this, his approval ratings have 41% is low, my friend.
Yes,
41%.
His approval ratings
41.
Well, they were always low among Republicans. They have plummeted among independents. That started actually a few months ago. Now they're plummeting among Democrats. He has a low approval rating, and when you ask when the polls ask specifically about his handling of Afghanistan, 63% think he bungled the job.
Well, I don't know what the other 37% are thinking about, unless you're on, friggin', you have dementia. How can you not say this is a royal screw up? And again, I love marketing and I love his handlers. He comes out in a press briefing, and the arrogance, if it was Trump, he'd be electrocuted. Talks about 3 or 4 things, then gets into Afghanistan and leaves without a question. What the hell is going on?
He does not take questions. If you pay attention to the press briefings, Jen Psaki, for the most part, does not give any real information. She dodges the questions. She goes, well, we're not going to get into that. Guess what? You're the press secretary. It's your job to get into it.
Well,
Biden needs to be removed from office. Harris needs to be removed from office, and we need a clean sweep of all of these idiots they put in.
No question about it, without a doubt. The arrogance, though, and the lack of feeling. What if you're a family that had someone die and the president just leaves without taking the hubris of doing this, leaving? Something in life, if you're in business, when I was in business, if you F up, guess what? There's questions. You can't just walk away from the office and say, sorry, Mr. CEO. Yeah, I did screw that one up. I'm going home and I'm going to, have a barbecue. Are you kidding me? You got questions to answer. What are you, nuts?
Biden and his press people, and they've actually said this, they think the American people are going to forget about this. It's not going to affect him politically because the American people will not remember. Well, let me tell you.
I think he's wrong.
Something. My goddaughter was a Marine in Afghanistan. I have spoken to veterans. I've spoken to Republicans. There is a huge percentage of this country that's going to make sure nobody forgets this.
Agreed, 100%. Now, concluding on a lighter, kind of a lighter note, but I
wouldn't call it lighter, but
No, yeah, you're right. Charlie Watts is deceased. We don't know what the cause. He missed a tour because there was some kind of a procedure. Obviously, it was bigger than people thought. But I'm just saying, I've been a huge Stones fan for quite a while. I've talked about it. We've talked about it on Carnivore Bites. I believe, and I've talked to a friend, when he died, he's like, oh, yeah, no. In his prime, and again, we already talked about that, his prime and their prime is well over. In his prime, he could bang it out like anyone. And he had a style. Everyone talked about Keith Moon. Yeah, he was awesome. But Watts had a style. And when he was younger, he could bang it out with the best of them. And they also say that it was his band. Like, it was him. I actually read a quote that it was Watts and Richards' band. That's it. They were it. They were the engine. Your thoughts?
Well, I've seen quotes like that. I think more people give the credit to Richards. It really was his band. He controlled it. But yeah, in his prime, Watts was incomparable. I mean, right now, we don't know what the cause of death was, but I mean, let's face it, he was 80 years old and the Rolling Stones did not live easy, so
no, but he had a pretty cool life. He was real quick. He was a funny guy. He didn't drive. He married the same woman for 57 years. And it was really funny. I read a quote this years ago that during the most amazing use of drugs in the 20th century, he didn't do anything almost. He became hooked on heroin when everyone else gave it up, like in 1985. But that's Charlie. Yeah, crazy. But anyway, I thought he was a great drummer. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was a fantastic drummer. But all my point was that we didn't know what the cause of death was, but from the way the Rolling Stones lived, even Watts, Lord knows there's any number of causes, and hopefully we'll learn more.
And I agree with you in closing. You are correct, because when they say, he was straight, if it was me, you would say, Jeff, you need to get help. I mean, in other words, on the bar, if you're a straight Rolling Stones, anyone else in society would be, buddy, man, you need to go to a rehab immediately. Like, you're really not in good shape. Well, that concludes this edition of Carnivore Bites. We are on a roll, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Lopkin, aren't we?
We are. We're getting more and more listeners, and you can find us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Carnivore Radio website, as well as Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Great show. Thank our listeners. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.